When it comes to card games, one of the hardest things that we kind of ignore as a base of fans or whatnot is that we usually don't see the fact that the game itself is necessarily hard if you've already been a player for so many years. Entry to the game, or any game for the most part, is actually not easy. And a lot of times we kind of ignore it as a fan base based solely on the fact that we're already accustomed to the game. Now, obviously, for today's topic of Off the Cuff, I'm actually going to be talking about net decking as a whole. Now, why this specific activity usually gets a lot of heat, even though I think it's a useful tool and really does allow us to expand the horizons of beginning, older, as well as returning players. Now, for the context of today, I'll be talking about it in broadly for card games, but I will be focusing more on Yu-Gi-Oh! Because this is actually one of the more hot-blooded topics, I think, for specifically this game, when in reality, for other games, it doesn't really matter as much. So obviously, guys, remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and you know what to do, follow the ad army. So pretty much, what is net decking for those who don't know, even though it's probably hard to not understand because you are online, but let's just talk about it. So net decking is effectively just looking online and finding out either deck lists, specific card interactions that you want, and just basically, some people view it as solely copying, even though I think it is more of gathering information on decks that you like and or building from seeing already pre-constructed deck ideas because of people already out having them posted. So pretty much this could be like copying a YouTube video deck profile for each card, or even just looking up how a deck plays and trying to copy exactly what they're showing off in that specific video. Now, for this specifically, why does this usually bring up so many hot-blooded topics? Now, for Yu-Gi-Oh!, I think it's more so the way that the anime kind of shaped the game, as well as the game itself being shaped around, where everybody's assuming net decking is bad because it doesn't really show any individuality or idea, and that couldn't be further from the truth, but I'll get into that later. Point is, a lot of people view net decking as a way to basically be too, I guess, like, too establishment is a way to look at it, or too a part of the system. A lot of people are looking at it as like, hey, you know, you're not really creative, you're just following that deck profile from, I don't know, someone else's channel, or hey, that was posted on like a message or like a group on like Facebook, you're just copying what they had listed down and you're not really making any innovations yourself. Now, obviously, that's kind of where most people view that and kind of see net decking as like a problem, but I really want to start dispelling some of these issues, and the biggest reason why is net decking as a topic is actually very, I think, confusing, and the reason why is it really that bad when people try to show off their profiles or show kind of how they play the deck? Is that really something that we take as a negative thing, or is that something we should take as a positive? Because a lot of times we look at people who are just trying to find a way to play a deck, where to start, and if someone has a build that works and people start playing it and it works for them, it kind of builds a circle around it, like a community. I like to think about it how we have lots of these Facebook groups for specific decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! And pretty much the people gather around to play the same deck, and they kind of show their ideas. It's not really net decking in the aspect of people copying card for card. I think it's more so people trying to build the best version of a deck they all like, and they're all showing their builds and seeing if it works. So this is where net decking, in my opinion, actually has a benefit to itself by working with other people, maybe players that are even better than you, or maybe working with players who are more unconventional than you. You find something pretty neat, pretty cool. I do think that aspect is kind of ignored, even though I think in the modern day we've kind of dispelled a lot of those issues, because obviously I think Facebook groups are a pretty good example where people specifically keep on every day trying to innovate or show how well their deck did, and the other people from their groups are trying to build the best version of that deck alongside them. Now, establishing kind of the foundation of how net decking is a net benefit, we need to talk about why people kind of think net decking as a whole in terms of like where it got its negative aspects. So I think a lot of things where we start to see the aspects of like negative net decking in terms of like how people view it is probably just from toxicity online. I'm not going to lie to you. This is usually from, I would say, like over competitive players. And I'm not saying competitive players, I mean over competitive. Now what this means is they're usually everybody kind of knows this type of like archetype of a player where they're trying to build the best deck. They're trying to make like the tier 1, tier 0 strategy. And it doesn't even necessarily mean it is the tier 1 or tier 0 strategy. This could be someone who thinks their Blue Eyes deck is arguably the best deck, period, and they won't hear anything from anyone else. Now, the reason I say the negative aspect of net decking came from this is because a lot of people put pride in their builds. They really do. And I don't think that's a bad thing. But I do think it's a bad thing when you put so much pride in your build that you tell people that if they're not playing something either too unique or something that's too similar, that they're not playing the game efficiently. It's like the phrase that a lot of us go with is that everyone plays the game differently and they kind of enjoy the game in their own manners. Whereas I do think one of the bigger problems Yu-Gi-Oh! Faced as a whole is everybody's starting to kind of reinvent how they enjoy the game. Whether you're a casual or a competitive player, you know kind of where you want to go. And in the case of, I think, these over-competitive players, sometimes they put people in different boxes, but their most important focus is, hey, I have this great build, I am the best player type thing, or I know how to do it right. Whereas, like, you know, everybody gets them in every game, I think, whether it's card games, video games, anything, you always have that one person who thinks one specific thing is the best way to do it, versus, like, there being multiple ways to do the right thing for some things. It's just different all the time. Now, for net decking specifically, these aspects are attributed to net decking having a negative outlook because a lot of people say, well, I don't want to show this. I understand for competitive players, or maybe they want to go to like a YCS or even like back in the day with Shonen Jumps, before there was really reliable ways to get access to online sources to see how well other people were playing. This wasn't necessarily, I think, a big issue. This is more of something where if you were at a locals and you're doing a lot of testing, maybe someone sees your deck and they really like it and they see you're really doing well and they're just like, well, I'm going to copy that. So yeah, I get it. That can be kind of annoying. But when we start looking at the broader scope of things, we're just trying to build the best decks or trying to compete well, net decking starts to seem more as a natural evolution of the game rather than it would be something that is, I guess, like not so standard. I think that's a really like weird way to look at it from people's perspectives where they think net decking doesn't make sense to happen. I think as a game and the internet evolved, your games or things you like, those hobbies evolve into it and they kind of start to see more aspects. People start to pay attention more. That's obviously why Yu-Gi tubing itself is so big because a lot of people do deck profiles. Everybody's probably done a deck profile at some point, and this usually stems from the fact that everybody kind of wants to show their sauce, their goo, something, or they want to show people, you know, kind of what they do, kind of what they cook, or maybe they're just a deck that they're happy with, and they're like, hey, you want to take a look? Here's a deck profile. All of these different aspects that usually sometimes get looked down upon when people are talking about the concept of net decking, it's just, you know, it's just carried to it. It doesn't necessarily mean it is bad or good. And that's where we have the dilemma, obviously, of why I think net decking isn't actually that bad. And if reality speaks, net decking kind of makes a lot of sense to just make the scene better. And my reasoning is this. If every metagame had a chance to not have any type of like internet like response, so like the sets would come out, we would not know exactly kind of how to build decks. Maybe everybody was just for some reason not able to see each other. So maybe you'd have like a local scene you'd work with and that's about it. I think we'd have stranger results at big tournaments and even locals where like, I think at locals it's more of your friend group would be kind of how you would gauge on building the meta and focusing on decks. Whereas with online, you're able to really reach out and kind of build these decks with the right, or not even the right, I think the best available minds. So I think like when you have super teams from like really good Yu-Gi tubers or super highly competitive players, they basically cook up these super decks and they're cooking them up effectively because they're working together to build like the super deck. They're basically working to build the best variant deck, or maybe they found the sleeper deck and they want to work with it. It's like they're not necessarily net decking, they're just working together to build it. Yet people can look online and say, oh, well, that's really good. Maybe they see it from the OCG and they're like, oh, well, that's good. That's going to be transfer over here. And get all these like different aspects where people are just kind of like bumping their heads and say, oh, well, blah, 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 blah. Maybe it doesn't translate to TCG, you know, X, Y, and Z. There's no max C, all that stuff. And kind of the reason that I want to like dispel the aspects of net decking is it's like there's a lot of players, and I think this is more important now than ever because we have so many players that are maybe transitioned to physical TCG, whether it's from like Master Duel, Duel Links, or even from like trying to play the ridiculous 2-player starter deck. And they want to really understand how to play the game. And I think it's almost a disservice to not tell people, hey, you should go look and try to find a deck. Maybe you want to like copy and paste it to try it out and see if you like it. To tell them not to do these aspects around net decking to try to make them a more adept player. I think it's unfair to attribute those people, if they are going to do it, or even normal people that just want to like see if they're building a deck wrong, that they can't do, or not even necessarily they can't do it, but they're less of a player or a person for doing that. And I don't really think that makes sense. I think it's more of like if there was a specific thing where people were like, oh, I don't want to show off the build because I want to run at the tournament. I don't want to, show people. And then that's understandable. I don't think people should try to like steal, I guess, whatever type of deck list you're cooking if like you don't want it out there. So, obviously don't put it out there is what I'm trying to say. But what I'm trying to get at is there are a lot of people who will kind of focus on not paying attention to that. They'll kind of just ignore it and just kind of go on and say, hey, net decking's bad. Don't do it. Good luck. And this is where I'm going to talk about my experiences with it. I wish I had net decked sooner than later. I was that player who picked up 2 structure decks and I mashed them together. It was specifically the Cyber Dragon structure deck, the first one with Cyber Dragon Zwei and Nova, and I smashed it together with what was it? From Cards from Breakers of Shadow and a single Monarch structure deck, the Emperor of Darkness. Now, I smashed them together. Actually, no, it wasn't that. It was actually the Felgrand structure deck. I smashed a Felgrand structure deck with a Cyber Dragon structure deck. And let me be honest, I did not know how to play it. So I was already kind of beginning. So it was a bad idea. Point is, it did not work. It did not work. It was ridiculous. And then the thing is, as I started to learn, though I picked this up from watching YouTube as I started watching more, because for my specific generation and like my household, this is before internet was like necessarily widely available. So at my own house, we did have Wi-Fi, but it was like really weak. And we had like really bad internet for the most part. It wasn't like super, I wouldn't say it's super bad to where we couldn't do stuff. It's more of like the old one where you could overload it, but too many people on it. So that happened. Effectively, it's like, I didn't actually watch YouTube for a long time. I don't think I started watching YouTube till like I was in high school, really. I watched it before, obviously, but I mean, like, I actually got to watch it. Like, actually start looking at YouTube and being like, oh man, there's like so much stuff to learn. I actually like didn't do that till I was about in high school. And I'd use Wi-Fi obviously at school, which was awesome because Wi-Fi at school was really good because, I did like different activities during lunch, but separated from this. Point is, I also learned how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! From people at school. So that was kind of cool too. But point is, if I had known there were so many, even like basic resources online then, I would have just loved to have used it then. Because there were so many like issues that me and my friends went with, because we basically learned to play Yu-Gi-Oh! By just like hard playing against each other and then kind of like looking it up as we went along. So we didn't really watch anything. If anything, we did like those pack opening videos. We'd watch it, people would pull stuff, and we'd open packs and we would play, but like we didn't really know how to play. So it wasn't until like we really started to watch videos and started realizing, oh, we're really not playing the game right, that I realized that, geez, like the first video I saw was they said pick up 3 structure decks, and I was like, well, I wasn't like broke, but then again during high school I had to like work for a lot of my money. So the funny thing was I was able to buy 2 more structure decks because I had used Amazon a lot. This is before I obviously I think TCG had existed and Troll and Toad, all those things existed, but I didn't use them. So I'm trying not to get on tangent, but it's a part of the situation. Is that I bought everything from Amazon, which was funny. So I would buy gift cards, or I would like just buy it with like my debit card I had at the time. And I remember getting the 2 structure decks and putting them together. And the funniest thing was my deck infinitely became better. So like my Monarch deck was like infinitely better. And I can't lie saying that this wasn't a good tip I got from, from specifically like YouTube. The funny thing was that the deck wasn't actually that good because the ban list had actually come out, I think it was like 2015, 2016, whichever the ban list was that hit Blue Eyes. Like actually hit, or they hit Blue Eyes. It made Blue Eyes win the, I think, 2016 World Championships. That hit Monarchs and all that stuff. And then the ban list I had before it, where like Monarchs were really weakened and it was like really, really bad. I think you had like 1 Aether and you had like you had Triple Tenacity. I think you had 1 Aether and then you had like something else that was at one, oh, one pantheism. So I had three structure decks, and then I couldn't even use two of the pantheisms, and I couldn't use two of the aethers. So I put them together, and it still was already better, which was funny because like I think the deck was a good A to B structure deck to learn to play. But the point was, if I had known net decking or like just even looking for resources online, I would have gladly liked to jump at it because it just would have made the process easier. And honestly, it makes it more enjoyable because there's a lot of players who I think this happens to a lot more now because there wasn't as many resources that many years ago, actually, like Master Duel, Duel Links, even. That stuff's all basically brand new, in my opinion, still, because it's only about like 7 years, 6 years. So that stuff hasn't even existed for a larger a portion of the game. Had we had those exist probably like in 2012, 2013 and forward and actually had them like, I won't say mass produced, but more available, stuff like that. I know apps were still uncommon, but the point is having a reliable way to learn the game in a more simplified format or understanding that there were more ways to play the game in terms of actually playing it properly, I think you would have had a much more advanced level of understanding for the game, like a lot of beginners. Because that was the problem we had, is that we're trying to pick up a game that is only really teachable through this like rule book that they would come with before. But even more importantly than that, the game wasn't very user friendly. Like one thing I always found hilarious is that me and my friends could do our homework faster than we could actually properly learn how to play the game. And that always just made me laugh because I was like, how can we just do this better? And then how can we do this stuff that like most kids or teenagers, right? Like you don't want to do. And then obviously for some reason you're just like really bad at trying to learn how to read a card game, even though the manual is right there. So, I'm just putting it there. It's like the internet could have made it so much easier. Basically teaching you how to play, how to read a card effectively, basically how to build a proper deck. I really think that that's like the key thing that net decking as a whole really allows, beginning players to do, is that it's better to know how to build a proper deck and then play the game. Like just know how turns go, rulings in turn kind of fall into that afterwards. But if you can actually learn how to play a single like turn or two turns out of a game and understand how to draw, you have a draw phase, a standby phase, whether you draw a card or not. You normal summon, you use effects, the difference between like, I guess, trigger effects and ignitions, what a cost is. Like, the basics from just like reading and actually knowing how to play. And you maybe want to build a deck that has like less strenuous things so you don't have to worry about specific interactions because maybe it's easier for you. So like maybe you want to play a trap deck. Maybe you want to play a deck that's just like a normal summon. You do a few things and then you just stop the turn. Maybe you want to try a combo deck, but you don't know how to do it. You can look it up. And maybe you can find a tutorial. Someone can show you how to basically do it. And then maybe, you need to understand other combos. So you watch other combos. And you start to realize where net decking becomes so important because it's not necessarily the practice. It's everything that comes with it. Every single step. Whether it's just trying to find a deck list you want to copy or you just want to find a way how to play a deck properly. That's so big. Like that's so important for the game as a whole, like longevity and just trying to get people into it as a whole. If people don't understand and if people can't find a way to actually play the game properly, what usually happens is the people who complain about people not being skilled at the game are usually probably these people that would kind of, sometimes this happens where they're the people who argue that either it's net decking, people are lazy, they don't have creativity, stuff like this. They're usually people who label this attribute to people who don't know how to play the game properly, when in reality, people who don't know how to play the game should probably learn how to catch up as quickly as possible. And I think net decking as a whole, you could probably just learn quickly. I think you can put a deck together better quickly. You can establish how to at least understand the fundamentals of the game quicker. I would say quickly again, but it wouldn't have worked. But the point is, you can do things and get people up to speed, new players, much more efficiently by doing this. Whereas we see it the other way around, people are making the game and making newer players probably struggle more than they need to. Like the two-player starter deck is a prime example of what happens when you're trying to make people learn something, but you're probably doing it in one of the most either unfun or very confusing way possible. Where, yes, I love that they did it the way that they did for the comic book, but I think reality-wise, I don't understand why we have a bunch of these structure decks or starter decks still that have all these random cards. I think it's better to teach someone a specific archetype because, well, here's 2 or 3 reasons. So I'm going to kind of plug Konami here. One, it's easier to teach someone a whole strategy because it's more efficient to get them into the game. Because if you give them a strategy and actually teach them how to play a specific deck, it will always be better because even by just trying to get the fundamentals, if a person can have the grasp of a single strategy in the game and actually learn how to play that effectively, there's probably no deck they can't play. Like, I think that's an illusion that they put in front of people, thinking that they can't learn how to play a specific strategy because they won't be able to figure anything out. I highly disagree with that, as long as you start them with a deck that's very easy to follow. 2, the product has to be good. Like, this is just kind of the thing to get new players in around that deck. The thing has to be good. If you give someone the 2-player starter deck that's right now, there's nothing they can do with it except maybe take Zeus, some of the Xyz monsters, I think, and almost get rid of the rest. Like, some of the staples they could keep, but there's no way they can build like a good foundation from that. There's no cards there that are synergistic with any other archetype, really. The ones that are don't have any search cards, and they're not part of archetypes that are even supported by Xyz or Synchro Summoning. Like, a good example would be if someone said, well, you could take the Visa Starfrost cards and play, like, a Manadium. You can't play Manadium with the 2-player starter deck. You can't play Manadium even when you add the cards from the 2-player starter deck and give it to a beginning player because they might get confused. There is a lot of intricacies in Manadium specifically, and usually Manadium isn't played as like a solely pure deck. There's like different cards you can run. You could run a cash engine. You can run various cards. You could run more synchros. You could run scare claws. You can run so much into that one strategy that it makes it unfair to watch people try to learn that wouldn't work. You would need Baron, you need so many other synchros links just to add to the deck. And if you take that, then you can't even really use anything. You don't even use Prime Heart, which is funny enough, is supposed to be the boss monster of the synchro deck. You don't even use it in Manadium as a whole. You use just like anything else that's better. So that's kind of where I'm saying that, they got to make it good and transferable. Third, and here's the third one. By teaching people to play a specific strategy out of each of these starter deck sets, right? If you did two starter deck sets similar to exactly what they did, but you put specifically any archetype to face another archetype. So I know I saw this in the SEMO video, so I'm actually referencing it because I'm not trying to say I made this up all myself. I plugged in because I watched that because I wanted to see if, like, from different people that are reviewing this thing. I also saw Team APS's that I wasn't going crazy. Like, this product sucks for the most part, even though I think it could have been so much better. Is that I agree, archetypes being placed into these decks would be the best way to do it. Like, the first thing is, I'm also a former Satellar Knight player. So when, he said, or Simo said, put in Satellar Knights, first thing that popped in my mind, brilliant, put in Satellar Knights. That would be a great way to teach people. The deck is very simple. The card's usually 1-to-1. It's very transferable because there's so much other support that has been released that goes with it. You don't even need to put in the new support. You leave the new support outside of these 2-player starter deck so that people can get familiar with it, and then they say, oh, well, maybe there's these other cards I need to pick up. As they get better at the game, they start to pick them up and start playing them. There's different, I think Trevere is a great boss monster for a beginner deck because it's basically Zeus, but it's an archetype. So people understand, hey, I can play this card, send cards to the graveyard, and it's a part of the deck. So you have cards like Skybridge, cards like Satellar Nova Alpha. All these cards kind of go into what makes Satellar Knight a whole archetype, but they could teach a player, hey, I have, A, B, and C. I have these cards. I need to find ways to better make this deck more Satellar Knight focused. So then they see the new Satellar Knight cards from the new Teller Knights that are basically considered like Constellars 2 or whatever. Those cards, easily add them to the deck if you need to make the deck better. You have the new Xyz monster. You have all these other cards you could use. And I think about for the other thing, you add a synchro deck pack. Maybe you don't even need a synchro deck. I honestly think the best two to start off teaching people how to play should have been Lynx versus Xyz. And the reason why is Xyz monsters done right are just literally 2 monsters. You could teach people how to do rank up if you want, but you don't have to. And with Lynx, literally, if you keep it simple, and I mean simple for Lynx, you have all of them just basically say either affect monsters or monsters of their archetype. And that's That's literally it. It's literally all you need. You can just focus on doing that. People can just get accustomed to that. Like one that I think would have been kind of cool to do, but I don't think they could have, would be Salamangreats, because they're very one to one, I think. Now, would it be a little bit overpowered to Satellar Knights? Yes, but since it's a starter deck, you can change how you want it to be. Like, I'm not saying to give people a, like, it doesn't need to be like a tier 1.5, tier 2 deck, or tier 1 deck outside the box. You can give it like a tier 2 deck or a tier 2 version of the strategy. This is for beginners. So you want cards not to have too many text. You want it to be simple. The only reason I'm saying specifically something like Salamangreat is that it's very one-to-one. You need to give people like one-to-one decks if they're beginners, because it really allows it to be simple. You have a card that's like a normal summon. They special summon. Actually, a deck like Goki might actually work now that I think about it, because I think it'd actually be better because you could reprint it. And I played Gokis myself, and I'm not talking about like Wombo Combo, so I don't want anyone putting down here like, something too nutty. I'm saying like just standard pure Goki. That would be pretty simple of a deck to follow, I think. Would it be a little bit overpowered to Satellar Knights? It's like, yeah, you could like change it up. But the point is, if we're talking about just a beginning deck, and you still want to stage it, that would be cool. You have like these, literally, they're knights, so they're like celestial knights versus like these wrestler warriors. I think that would work for a beginning starter deck. And then when people start to look into more of the support, they're like, okay, I can make this deck a bit better. Like, I think a boss monster being like Giant Ogre, or even just like Goki the Great Ogre, that card could just be fine as a boss monster against like Trevair and Deltaros, and then even if you want to, you could give generic links if you really wanted to. You can give like, I don't know, like the normal monster links that are like, they just take two monsters. So like, I think it's Lamphorincus, you could put that in. You could still put Castell in there and just kind of have them as like options. But the point is, these would be better. These would be better because guess what? When someone has all these cards, they're like, well, what do I do next? They go straight to watching someone's video and they're like, okay, I need to get this, this, and this. And they could put together a Satellar Knight deck or this, this, and this. They could put together a Goki deck. And guess what? They have a playable deck. They can start playing at locals. They could technically go to a regionals or YCS if they want to. I don't know how good the deck would do. But the point is, they have those tools available to them. And guess what? The community wins as a whole. This is why I think net decking for the most part at this point is like a moot point for people to get mad about. If you don't want anything put out there, don't put it out there. But if you want to share with people, don't get mad at people when they either build the best deck, they build a deck that's really good, or you're like, oh, that's just so typical. It's like, so what? If you want to go against the grain, go against the grain. But there has to be something said for people who try to innovate by playing the best deck and finding the like even better ways to play it, and people who don't want to play with the grain, they want to go against it completely, and they want to like build rogue decks, and they're just like, or they have their secret techs and they're playing a deck differently. Something has to be said for them too. But the point is, I think dispelling these aspects of net decking is kind of the key we need, because I think it allows, specifically, like, I know I've been talking about Yu-Gi-Oh a lot, but it allows the card game community as a whole to grow, because if everybody who starts the game has a positive idea of looking for resources in general, then that's a win. So that's how I'm saying it. If everybody looks at the planning to play the game and say, I want to do that because I know it'll be easier, people will help me, that is a win. No matter what anyone says, it is a W. So take that home, and that's where we're finishing today's episode of Off the Cuff, because, like I said, net decking isn't bad, but come on, W what I said, W. But pretty much that's all I've got for you guys today. I hope this helped you out. I hope you made it to the end here. And obviously, like I said before, if you are watching this on Rumble, come on and follow. I'm trying to build it up there too. You might be getting Rumble exclusive videos. YouTube will be having some YouTube exclusive videos, because I think I'm having pseudo burnout from having too many things on the channel here. So I think I'm going to split them up a bit more and have different things on both of the different platforms. So pretty much that's what I've got for you guys today. And as always, this is Brad from the Ed Army signing off. And for all of you out there, to sign on.